HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Property Species, Mine, Yours, and the Human Mind, by Bart J. Wilson. Read by Mike Lenz. Publisher's Note: in this audio edition you will hear references to figures and tables present in the print and ebook formats of the book. Nobody ever saw one animal by its gestures and natural cries signify to another, "This is mine," that yours. Adam Smith. Prologue. Within arm's reach of where I write sit a pen and a cup. Someone made these things for people like me to use, and someone made and used the tools to make the pen and the cup for people like me to use. Both the pen and cup are themselves tools that extend the powers of my hands to do things that I cannot physically do with my body alone. While many animals use tools, and a few animals make and use tools to make a tool, only human beings make and use tools to make and use derivative tools, like those that are needed to make pens and cups. From the Machigenga of the Amazon basin jungle to the Kung of the Kalahari Desert, a common characteristic of human tools is that there appears to be an invisible connection between an individual person and the tool. In a legendary tale, such a connection means that only King Arthur could pull Excalibur from the stone. In our unenchanted world, if I leave a pen or cup on the table at a faculty meeting, people tend to ask questions like, "Is this someone's pen?" or "Whose cup is that?" Such queries are an attempt to establish some sort of connection between someone in the room and the thing. The answer can be as simple as, "It's mine," and its utterance completes the connection sought between a person and the object. Even though professors can always use an altitude-proof pen, and everyone uses some sort of container to help them satisfy their thirst, people, as a general rule, do not seize every fine pen or durable cup they see and could make good use of. In a world filled with things that humans have made, there is an order, a pattern, to how they engage them and one another. This book is about how human beings perceive the world of useful things, and how and why they act in the orderly way that they do regarding them. To an economist, the source of this regularity needs some explanation, if we are to tackle the grander question, as it is typically posed to first-year students of economics, of how a society allocates scarce goods to people with inherently unlimited wants. Jurists and the law speakers before them have been pondering the rules governing the order of people and things for time out of mind, and philosophers from the ancients to the present have reflected on the justifications for connections between people and things. Comparatively recently, anthropologists and archaeologists, and even linguists, have studied the relationships between people and the things they make and use. How does such a connection work? And why do human beings make them? What composes the connection between a person and a thing? The book is a cross-disciplinary synthesis, with a distinctly biological eye, about the ordinary details we take for granted regarding people and the world of things they use. In the hurly-burly room of a primary school, teachers frequently ask questions like, "Whose mittens are these?" and "Whose scarf is this?" For the 7-year-old who shouts, "Mine," and then grabs the Hello Kitty mittens en route to the playground, the ordinary exchange of words makes perfect sense. What more is there to think about? It's time to play in the snow. Consider what the children and we take for granted in such a scene. While many of the children look at the mittens when the teacher speaks, only one responds, and the teacher expects that only one student will respond to his question. Having spotted the mittens, the girl in the matching Hello Kitty coat also expects to be the only child to respond to the teacher's question. Even the students who have not yet located a pair of mittens do not say anything and do not grab for them. Amid the clamor and scramble for hats and jackets and boots and scarves, there is a semblance of order, a pattern that determines the nature and timing of the children's encounters with a host of inanimate things and with one another. A closer look at the classroom reveals that the students heed the physical differences of some objects in the classroom and ignore others. A student can tell the difference between a red pencil sitting on a desk and a yellow pencil inside a backpack. But for a student needing to complete a math exam, a pencil on the desk and a pencil in the backpack are both pencils. Both are writing implements, non-distinctively so. Other things in the classroom, like garments for covering hands, are distinctive. A pair of Hello Kitty mittens on a wall hook and a pair lying on the floor are not interchangeable. They may be physically identical in every way, but even if the pair on the floor is closer, a child distinguishes the two so as to grab the pair on the hook before heading out to the playground. Only the child who entered the classroom with the Hello Kitty mittens, now on the floor, calls the pair on the floor mine. The children's minds structure the world of classroom things in a particular way. They perceive distinctive differences in some things, but not in others. In other words, the children have different sets of expectations regarding the physical things they perceive in the classroom. From the point of view of the children, their actions adhere to a schedule that constitutes a set of expectations about their actions, and such expectations order what they do, their response to the external stimuli of sights and sounds in the classroom. If the pair of mittens on the floor is not mine, the child's schedule calls for leaving them on the floor and walking over to the pair on the wall hook. If the pair of mittens on the floor is mine, and the teacher asks, "Whose mittens are these?" the scheduling pattern indicates yelling, "Mine." When dealing with mittens at this place, time, and circumstance, the children act in a certain manner. The central question is what composes a certain manner of connecting a particular child to a particular thing at this place and time. The biological-sounding terminology of scheduling, appropriated from the linguist-turned-anthropologist C.F. Hackett, will prove a useful way to organize someone's information about a particular person in a particular community regarding some thing. It has the added feature of shaking us out of our comfort zone and giving us a perspective, rather different from our everyday, first-person view of how we human beings deal with one another regarding things. Like a biologist from Mars, we can think of every animal's body, human children's included, as containing a program of actions and events regarding things, a schedule. Such a schedule orders the organism's actions as it interfaces with its environment and what the environment offers the organism. For example, a red-winged blackbird, Agelaius phoenicius, calls out to indicate its presence when perched on a tree. A short and simple vocalization deters nearby birds looking for a limb on which to rest. If a bird nevertheless approaches, the resident prepares to fight the interloper. During courtship and mating, however, the red-winged blackbird's schedule calls for vocalizations that are longer and more complex. That is, the male bird sings to attract a female. If a potential mate approaches, the seduction continues with tail feathers spread and shoulder patches fluffed. We can think of an organism's body, its nervous system, as running a continuous software program that receives neurophysical inputs from the external world. The software program classifies and organizes these inputs and then gives as output what, if anything, is to be done. If the program classifies the inputs as constituting courtship season, then a male red-winged blackbird produces a long and complex sound to attract a mate. If the program classifies the inputs as not constituting courtship season, then the male produces short and simple vocalizations to deter interlopers. The important thing to recognize in this example is that the organism's body contains a schedule, such that sufficiently similar events in the external world produce a pattern of actions to be carried out by the organism. Every April during breeding season, male red-winged blackbirds sing to attract mates, and every August, after breeding season, they vocalize to deter interlopers. Whether a red-winged blackbird or a first grader, the timing of an organism's actions adheres to a scheduling pattern that constitutes a set of expectations about what the organism will or will not do, the state of affairs and probable results of the actions, and the appropriate response to the external events. I use the term scheduling pattern to compactly refer to the idea that an organism's body classifies neurophysical inputs of events in the external world to produce a set of expectations regarding an orderly pattern of actions that the organism will undertake in the external world. My goal is to think of a human animal's scheduling pattern as an explanation for why it does what it does in particular circumstances involving certain things. As an economist, such thinking does not come naturally to me, nor does it, I imagine, come easily to social scientists more generally, philosophers, or legal scholars. It requires us to think of a person's schedule regarding other people and things as being a physical phenomenon. Our human scheduling regarding things is located in both the individual animal itself and the animal's environment. The part literally in the animal is, of course, that which is in our genes, our physical bodies, and in the totality of knowledge given by perception and accumulated in our bodies. The part literally in our environment is that which is in other organisms and the physical world of things. Notice that I do not say that our physical bodies are the sole cause for what humans do. I say much more modestly that, like all animals, our physical bodies supply us with one of two important causes for human scheduling. Our bodies store our accumulated experiences, and all that we know by experience is given to us by our genetically supplied perception. A common genetically scheduled biology means that there are some universal features about humans, including, at least conceivably, how humans perceive and know the connections between people and things. It could also conceivably mean that when it comes to scheduling patterns regarding things, humans are like other primates, or other mammals, or even birds. At this point, we do not know if either specifically human genes, or both human and non-human genes, or neither, explains human behavior regarding things, though the scheduling terminology allows us to put the question marks deeper down. The second important cause of human scheduling resides in the people and things that surround us. Some birds and many mammals, especially primates, socially transmit practices from one generation to another. Mentors teach the next generation how to attract mates, forage for food, and even make and use tools. Such a cause is physical in that the mechanism resides in things external to the individual organism. It is thus also conceivable that some human communities may pass down different practices regarding people and things, including not having any practices about some things at all. How, then, do we know if it is the first physical cause in our mammalian bodies or the second physical cause in our environment that explains the human scheduling pattern that connects people and things? Or, here's a crazy idea. Perhaps the answer lies to some degree in both us and others. As Hackett so wonderfully puts it, that is not yet known, and the scheduling terminology reminds us of our ignorance. Up until this point, I have purposely avoided using a key term that every listener is surely expecting given the title of the book. Over 12 years ago, almost on a whim but certainly as an afterthought, I started working on property rights. Except for the subject of economists who specifically work on them, everyone takes property rights for granted, or more precisely, treats them as a given or a constraint in their analysis. In 2006, my colleagues Sean Crockett and Vernon Smith and I received comments from a blind review on a project exploring how people discover exchange and specialization in virtual world economies. The reviewers questioned why our undergraduate participants found it difficult to specialize and trade virtual tokens with one another for real cash. As much as $28 to $31.50 for a little over an hour's work. They surmised that because our software did not explicitly enforce contracts between the participants, they must have been worried that their counterparts would not fulfill their promises to deliver the goods. It turned out the chat room transcripts revealed that no one ever complained about such a problem. But the question got us thinking. We had taken for granted that our virtual world perfectly enforced property rights. The participants in the original experiment discovered that they could freely move items to other people, but they could not move them from other people. What would happen if we relaxed that unexamined assumption? What would happen if we changed nothing else in the experiment, not even the instructions, except that people could now discover how to move items both to and from each other? All hell breaks loose is what happens. Virtually speaking, of course, in case members of my institutional review board are listening. Even though all of our participants lived in a Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic society, their first weird impulse was not to give things to other people, but to take them. Items flew around the screen from one person to the next. In their public chat room, they frequently talked about war. From my view in the monitor room, it certainly looked like chaos. Only about 1 out of 6 independent groups established stable possession of the virtual goods and then specialized and exchanged with one another to create the maximum possible wealth. Another 1 out of 6 sessions on average would eventually establish stable possession, but it was much slower, and the session ended before they could exploit more than half of the potential gains from trade. My co-authors Eric Kimbrough and Vernon Smith and I were surprised at how easily we could create such a poor and nasty and brutish world with supposedly civilized participants. They could not virtually kill one another, or their lives would have probably been solitary and short, too. By this time in my career, I had conducted a couple hundred laboratory sessions about economics, and Vernon probably several thousand since he started running them in 1956, and we had often seen beautiful, orderly, and prosperous behavior, even when the default expectation of our discipline was for our human subjects to be selfish and inefficient. The sudden, vicious appearance of chaotic and poor human societies shocked us. We first looked for the problems that the different groups faced. Often there would be one bad apple in a group of 8 who would prey upon the others without remorse. We wondered what would happen if we gave the participants a way to shun remorseless predators. Some of our colleagues noted that our experiment did not allow people to trade resources with people with the virtual ability to protect them from plunder. Others said that the experiment did not allow people to perfectly commit themselves to refrain from taking things from one another. If we added one of these features, that would solve the problems. None of it worked. If anything, the externally imposed mechanisms made things worse. Shunning bad apples encouraged isolation from potential trading partners, and the group was thus quite poor. Instead of a benevolent protector, we observed an unrepentant mafiosa, even though we chose her from the position because she was not inclined to take things before she got her powers. And permanently committing not to take things from others only exposed such community-minded people as suckers to those who scorned such a commitment. In short, we failed in session after session, treatment after treatment, to systematically introduce the means to produce an order regarding people and things. We learned that there is a huge difference between imposed and emergent solutions. In retrospect, the problem was that we had focused our attention, as is the case in almost every public policy debate, on the ugly failures of the human world, and not on the wonder of its extraordinary and uncommon successes. The scientific failure was an aesthetic one. We had failed to admire the beauty of the rare and orderly way some groups of people acted with regard to things. Notwithstanding the current pessimism at the dawn of the Anthropocene, this book is about the wonder, surprise, and admiration of the human propensity to orderly conduct ourselves with regard to the external things of the world. It is about property, which is, as the 18th century Scottish economist and sociologist Adam Ferguson brilliantly described many human institutions, indeed the result of human action, but not the execution of any human design. I postponed introducing the words property and property rights because familiar words, particularly social and economic ones, come with the baggage of preconceptions. After running my first experiment on property rights, I started reading John Locke and David Hume for some philosophical insight. And I noticed something curious. They never used the phrase property rights, a term pervasive in modern economics, philosophy, and law. They talk about property and about rights, but never the compound property rights. Neither do their eminent predecessors Hugo Grotius and Samuel von Pufendorf, who wrote in Latin, mostly about dominium and sometimes about proprietas. Henry of Bracton in 13th century England comes close, but the Roman jurisprudential phrase he uses is always grammatically singular and best translated with the possessive case as the right of property, jus proprietatis. The earliest use of property rights that I can find in Google books is from Lord Gardenston in 1774, and then it is hyphenated and used only once as a conceptual contrast to a copyright, which isn't the modern usage. At some point late in the 19th century, the idea of property rights takes off, and by the early 20th century, the term is fully entrenched. If property rights are a modern invention, a modern idea, then how old is property? The last few hundred years of Western European history? A couple of thousand years of Western civilization? Several millennia of human agriculturists? A couple hundred millennia of modern humans? 500,000 years of hominin hunters? A couple million years of hominin scavengers? 5 to 10 million years of great apes? 30-some million years of primates? 300 million years of mammals? All right, I admit it. I am belaboring the question as only a lover of natural history museums would. But the point is, if we are to answer some open questions regarding how property works in the modern world, we also have to be open to exploring why our species happens to have it, which raises the obvious question, so what is property? Part 1. Claim and Title, Origins. 1. The meaning of property in things. Let me put my cards on the table. Property is a universal and uniquely human custom. Initial reactions to the claim will differ. Cultural relativists will reflexively cringe at the notion of property being a human universal. Their counterclaim would be that property is a modern, Western European, hegemonic construction, the cause of wars and quarrels in the world. One of their patron saints from the 18th century, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, imagined what miseries and horrors would the human race have been spared had we not forgotten that the fruits of the earth belong to all and the earth to no one. In the 19th century, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon declared what many still believe 100 years later: property is theft. Biologists will immediately search their mental databanks for a counterexample in the animal kingdom. There must be at least one other species besides Homo sapiens, a primate for sure, or perhaps a dolphin or a squirrel, that exhibits, at least on occasion, some behavioral patterns of property. They will be quick to tell you that male baboons appear to own the females in their harems, that red squirrels seem to treat the tree in the backyard as their property, and that rare delicacy of a Spanish mackerel sure looks like it belongs to that bottle-nosed dolphin holding it with his mouth. Birds also defend their claims on things against interlopers. Western scrub jays, for example, protect their food caches from theft by rehiding them if a potential pilferer is in sight for the initial catching. The biologist's own words to describe such behaviors are own, property, and theft. Legal centralists, which include most ordinary people and social scientists, will at first take pause at, if not take issue with, the idea of property as mere custom, for governments surely institute and enforce the rules of property. How is custom going to return my stolen bicycle, you ask? Well, report it to the police and see what happens. Nothing happens. And that nothing happens does not help us explain why millions of bicycles go unstolen each day. But, you continue, don't the police and district attorneys spend more time on the bigger stuff still covered by the local evening news, like department store heists and carjackings caught on surveillance video? Yes, but that's beside the point. Consider that relatively rare exceptions to the rules of property cannot explain the regularity with which people, as a rule, generally follow the general rules of property. How many people would never seriously consider, even if no one would ever know, taking a misplaced wallet or claiming a rusty box with $52,000 worth of treasure buried in one's own Staten Island backyard? That non-enforcement is the non-governmental institution in need of a non-legal centralist explanation. Undeterred, you give it one more shot. Such non-enforcement is the shadow of the law extending its reach. Why then, I ask, does the shadow not work the same in all countries? At its core, property is a custom whose practice differs, sometimes radically, from place to place, even though the law's shadow is the same. Laws against crossing the street against the light are the same in Berlin and Rome. Why no same shadow? Philosophers and lawyers wouldn't first reach for the word custom as their substantive of choice. In philosophical and legal treatises, property rests on rights, not custom. Rights, plural, are not as new as an abstract notion as are property rights, but in terms of the human career, a multi-millennial old idea is still relatively new. Such a fact by itself doesn't preclude rights as an explanation of property in humans. New abstract concepts are useful, if not necessary, for explaining new phenomena. Quarks, for example, are a relatively new notion in physics, and their indirect validation in experiments in the 1960s subsequently explain the composite particles discovered in cosmic rays in the late 1940s. The old language of protons, neutrons, and electrons was simply inadequate to explain new, more fundamental constituents of matter. But if it is exceedingly difficult, as Auguste Comte put it, to work out new conceptions in the old language, imagine how much more difficult it is to work out old conceptions in the new language. If the objective is to explain the Rutherford model of the atom, and how we came to understand the atom as having a positively charged center orbited by negatively charged electrons, the new lexicon of hadrons, baryons, and mesons, not to mention 6 flavors of quarks, would only bog us down. Even though the modern standard model of particle physics explains phenomena unintelligible to physicists a century ago, the Rutherford model does a fine job explaining some practical problems about matter, like why dropping cesium into water is an explosive proposition. I lay my cards boldly, but hopefully not explosively, on the table, because I think it is important to draw the distinctions I wish to make as clearly as I can. Depending on which department you visit at your favorite university, you will hear some rather different perspectives on property. On one side of campus, only some modern human beings have property, but on the other side, all sorts of animals have property in food, mates, and territory. In buildings in between, home to the law school and the soft but not squishy social sciences, people entertain both views. Social scientists and legal scholars will say that, based on everyday experience, it certainly looks like the family dog has property when he guards his toy, and those same professors will tell you that 17th century Native Americans did not have notions of property like their European conquerors had. As a mid-most social scientist and law professor myself, let me propose a sticky compromise. All humans have property in things, and Homo sapiens is the only animal to have property in things. As with most compromises, no one will be happy with this one. Current thinking in biology is that the gap between humans and all other animals is small. Only human hubris makes humans exceptional in the animal kingdom. The thinking in humanities departments is that the number and scope of human universals is so small that there are more important cultural things to talk about and social problems to attend to. Only humans pride themselves on building the world as they imagine they can design.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?